What's going on, guys? Stefan here with you, S&E's Garage. Today we have our GX470 behind us, and we are going to be beginning the process of installing our lift kit and rear air to coil conversion. So we got in touch with the guys over at Yotamafia. I'm going to drop their website in the video description down below. We talked to them. We kind of described what our plans were with this, what our goals were, and they kind of steered us in the direction that I think ended up being best for us. So what we ended up going with is their 2.5 to 3 inch lift kit using Bilstein 5100s shocks. You'll see them here. This is one of the front struts. And Old Man Emu springs. That's going to be in the front. We went with the heavy duty springs in the front simply because these things are pretty raked from the factory, and I wanted to get rid of that rake, number one. And number two, there's a big iron block V8 under the hood of this, and their springs that they make are for both the 4Runner and the GX470. So you have to take into account the 4Runner has a V6 in it for most of them, and with the V8 you're adding a lot of weight there. So that's going to help get rid of the rake, and it's going to help take care of the extra added weight for that V8 engine. And if I decide I want to add a bumper to this, I'll have the heavier springs to cope with that. Now in the rear, we did something similar. Also, Bilstein 5100s. We have the air to coil conversion kit. Again, we got this from Yotamafia. This is a Dobinson, and then we have the Old Man Emu springs here for the rear as well. Now we also ended up going with SPC adjustable front upper control arms. That's going to allow us to dial in the caster after we are lifted, just to make sure that everything in here jives the way it is supposed to. So what you'll see here is we went ahead and we got the back wheels off. One thing I want to show you over here is it looks like somebody wore these brakes down to metal, because when I pulled this I said, oh my god, look at all this rust, and then I began to wipe it off. So these pads were definitely down to the metal, and you can see it's got a new caliper on it, so this caliper probably seized, but that's besides the point. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get right to work here. So the first thing that we're going to have to do here is we're going to have to go ahead and disconnect these sway bar end links. I'm going to try to do it from up here. If not, we'll just do it right from the sway bar, whichever is easier. That's going to allow us to then go ahead and drop the rear axle to remove the airbags and the shocks. These shocks, it is some sort of a Magna ride. We are going to have to bypass that, so that should be fun. And you can see that the shocks are pretty beat. This was a Southern car for most of its life, but not its whole life. So it does have a little bit of surface rust here. We're going to try to clean up as well. So our end links actually didn't fight us at all. They ended up coming right out from the top. We used a ratcheting 12mm wrench. And you'll see the hardware here. We did just squirt it down with a little bit of PB Blaster, but you'll see they came right out. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get this thing up in the air, and we're going to go ahead and support the rear axle, and we're going to go ahead and begin removing the airbags. Now, we want to remove the airbags before we remove the shocks, because if you remove the shocks first, the airbags are under load, and they're going to try to push the axle down. The shocks are what is actually stopping the axle from dropping any further than this. So we're going to go ahead, deflate the airbags. I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. We're going to remove them, and then we're going to go ahead with the shocks. We're going to start down here at the knuckle, and then we'll double back up here. You'll see I already have these soaking with some PB Blaster, and then we are just going to have to unplug them. And then I'm going to fill these connectors here up with some dielectric grease, just to prevent any moisture or corrosion from getting in there and ruining the harness, should I ever decide to convert this back to stock. So under here, there's going to be two air lines you're going to want to be looking at. There's going to be one here going to this is the driver's side airbag, and then up over here, this is the one going to the passenger side airbag. We're just going to go ahead and snip them with a pair of dikes. Again, I'm not planning on converting this back, but you're going to want to snip them in a location to where if you ever want to, all you have to do is get like an airline coupler and just rehook them up. So we're going to go ahead and snip them. That's going to deflate the bags. Just make sure you're wearing safety glasses or something like that in case a lot of air comes out of them. You don't want to get blasted in the face with dirty air or debris. Now, once you go ahead and do that, you're gonna see that your airbags are now nice and loose. So what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna look up here in the gap between the body and the frame, and you're gonna see a little metal clip with a tab on it. We have to go ahead and pull that tab out, and that's going to allow us to go ahead and drop the airbag out from under the car. So we just went in here with our little pick tool. We went in here and popped the clip out, so that clip is out. And now you can just go ahead and grab your airbag, and you're gonna kind of wiggle it a little bit from the top. Might fight you a little, but it should come out. It's coming. We're stuck on the air connector for the airline. There it is. And you'll see your airbag is now removed. So now we can go ahead, like I said earlier, support the axle, and let's go ahead and remove the shocks. Next up, you're gonna use a 17mm, and you're gonna remove the bottom bolt of the shock. And again, we have the axle supported now, and you're just gonna go ahead and use a pry bar and pry this off of the axle. Like so, and you'll see our shock is now disconnected from the axle. We're gonna go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. So the next thing you're gonna wanna do is go ahead and tackle this electrical connector. You're gonna have to spray it out with brake clean or something similar, because mine on the other side was all clogged and I couldn't get the tab to release. But once you do that, it should pop right out, unless this one's gonna fight me like the other side did. Just gonna get a flathead in here and push this tab down. Be prepared for that connector to fight you a little bit, because it definitely just fought the heck out of us. But once you get that out, now we can go ahead and tackle the top shock bolts or nuts. We're gonna go ahead and do that now. They look to be, to me at least, like 17mm. I'll update you in a second and we'll go ahead and take them out. So we got the shock off. It fought me till the bitter end. If you just look at how twisted the shaft is, I ended up having to grab the metal collar with a pipe wrench, this guy here, and double up wrenches up top, and I really had to crank on it to get it loose. So what we just did here, we just touched up the frame a little bit with some enamel. So while I'm waiting for this to dry, I wanted to paint this before I put my nice new shocks and stuff in. I wanted to make that look good. That way we don't get, paint all over our shocks. So while we're waiting for that to dry, we're gonna come over here. We're gonna go ahead and remove this shock. So we're gonna try that same method on this side. Because what was happening before is the whole shock just wanted to spin. So the pipe wrench should prevent that from happening. And God. Let me move you guys over here. I can't even tell if this is loosening or if I'm just twisting the shock again, but stay tuned. This is how I got it off. We're gonna get this one off. Same thing happened here, except this time it actually broke, but the shock is off. That's a win. We're gonna clean this up with brake clean real nice. I'm just gonna spray it, make it look good like I did the other side. We gotta get all this rust buildup from the failed caliper that this must have had off of the frame before I spray it. So let's just go ahead and clean that up, and then once that dries, we'll go ahead and we'll start putting our new springs in. So we're at a point now where we can start preparing this suspension here for some springs. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna take our Dobinson air to coil conversion, and we're gonna set our bottom perches in place like so. And then it's gonna come with hardware. You're gonna have a long Allen key with a nut. And we're gonna go ahead, slide the Allen key through. And then we're gonna use a nut and washer down on the bottom, tighten it down. So we went ahead and got our bottom perches installed. It's kind of a pain in the neck. The easiest way that I can recommend to do it is use a long pair of needle nose to basically fish the nut in from the fuel tank side, so from back here, and then come up top and just get the bolt started into the nut with the washer. And then you can go ahead and grab your ratchet with a 8mm Allen key and snug it down. So you'll see we got that on, we got the isolators on. So now we can go ahead over here to the spring, and we're gonna go ahead and set these springs up in the upper perches and bump stops. So this is what you're gonna wanna see with your new spring. This isolator here is gonna go on the top with the fat side, and then the skinny side is going to be down at the bottom. We're gonna go ahead and wrestle these springs in now. So we got our springs in. You're gonna see them here. You'll see the bump stop up top with the top isolator, and then the bottom isolator that we installed earlier down here. The way you're gonna want your springs is you're gonna want them turned until the ridge on the bump stop is basically sitting against the end of the spring. A couple of things you're gonna have to do to drop this axle low enough to get the springs in. First, you're gonna wanna disconnect this track bar. It's gonna let that side of the axle come down a little bit more. And then there is a brake bracket for the brake lines up here. I may end up having to get extended brake lines, I'm not sure yet. But it's a 12mm right there. I just unbolted that. That way I didn't have a bunch of stress on the rubber lines there for the brakes. But now what we're gonna go ahead and do is we're gonna put the jack back up under the axle. We're gonna jack it up. We're going to get our track bar back in, and then we can go ahead and put our shocks on, and we're gonna call it a night. Our goal tonight was to get the rear end of the truck done, and that's just about what we've got here. And what you're gonna see here is our shocks are in, sway bar end links are in, and everything back here is good to go. We went ahead and reconnected our track bar and put the brake line bracket back in. Now, if you go on Bilstein's website and you look up the directions for these shocks as far as how to install them, it's gonna be wrong. Don't bother. Half of the stuff that comes in their kit, you're not going to need. Let me just show you, for example. They have a bunch of different collars. One like this, one like that, one's thicker, one's thinner. You're not going to need to use them. Those are for if you have a Tacoma. These are made for a Tacoma. Now, these pieces here are to help center the shock, the shaft of the shock into the frame. With the GX, it already has one of them basically built into the system, so you're not going to need that. You put the one washer flat face up. You put the rubber bushing with the collar in it, collar facing up, no collar, and then you put this top washer with the flat facing down, and you tighten it all up. So what we're gonna go ahead and do now, like I said, we're done with the back. So we're gonna go ahead and throw the wheels on, put some weight on it, and we're gonna see how it looks. Now later on in the video, we are going to have to pull some relays and fuses to go ahead and disable the rear air suspension. So stay tuned for that. But once we get it back down on the ground, tomorrow, day after, whenever, we're gonna tackle the front end. Like we saw earlier, we have some control arms to put in it, some nice new strut assemblies. We have a lean preventer. This is basically a 3 or 4 millimeter spacer that's going to go up here in the shock tower right here to help prevent the factory lean that these have to the driver's side. So we're going to go ahead and do all that, and then we'll be good to go, and we'll be able to get our big tires over there on it and get it lined up. So stay tuned, and we'll be back with you. It's going to be 2 seconds for you, probably a day or two for us. So here we are, following night. We got the rear done last night, and we're up here now. We are going to be replacing these upper control arms. Again, we have some SPCs over there, and we're basically going to be taking this whole suspension apart. Now, because this is the GX, it has an adjustable front strut, and up here is some sort of a module that allows, you know, the computer to adjust the fluid in the shock somehow. And it's held in with some Torx bits. Now, if we were reusing all of this stuff, you know, maybe replacing the strut and keeping that system intact, what you would have to do is loosen the 3 shock or strut bolts. You would drop the shock down and hope that that would give you enough room to get a Torx bit in there to go ahead and get that out. Now, because we are replacing this with a different setup, and I have no intentions of going back to stock, we just used a pry bar. I just cracked it. I broke it right off. So now right underneath that is going to be a 17 millimeter nut, and we are going to go ahead and get that off. And that is going to take the bracket for the electric adjustment off. So I literally came in here like this and just blew this thing apart. So we're gonna do the same thing on this side. Let's get this thing off, and then let's go ahead and begin disassembly. Now, what I am going to be doing, I'm going to attempt to leave the lower control arm and the knuckle in. We're gonna disconnect it here from the tie rod. We're going to disconnect it here from the ball joint, and we're going to pull all of this bracketry off. We're going to probably have to hang the caliper here, get it off the knuckle, because we are also replacing this CV axle and all of the seals that have to do with that. So we're just going to, again, we're going to begin ripping this thing apart. So let's start here just by getting all this fluff off. We're going to pull this bracket off. We're going to pull the sway bar end link out, and we're just gonna go ahead and start tearing it apart. So let's just show you where we're at here really quick. We went ahead and removed the 3 strut bolts here from the top of the strut tower. The strut is loose for what it's worth. It's a little tight because we got all the bushings and everything holding it up. The rotor is off, the caliper is off. It is being hung here. You'll see here's the hose. And we also disconnected the ABS wire from this bracketry here, so it is not under any tension. It's just kind of hanging out. Now, we ran out of room here with this 17 millimeter nut. We're starting to hit the body of the truck, and I don't want to get my ratchet stuck up in there. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to go ahead. I went ahead and pulled this cotter pin or safety clevis pin, whatever you want to call it. We're going to go ahead and remove this. This looks like another 17 millimeter castle nut. And then we're going to strike the knuckle right here. It should pop this ball joint loose. And then we can, you know, start taking this dust cap off, undoing the axle, and at that point I think we should be able to drop the lower control arm enough to lower this strut and then get it out. So this is something I thought was important to catch on video. We went ahead and removed the dust shield here from the front of the hub, and then we removed the cotter pin with the safety lock. It basically locks this nut here into place. Now, unfortunately for us, Toyota used a really weird size here. This is a 35 millimeter nut. All I have is a 36, but it is a square nut here, so it shouldn't round it off. We're gonna try to zip it off. If it doesn't, I'm gonna have a problem, but no problem. So now let's just, gonna have to get my air hammer here, and we're gonna have to push this axle in to free it from the hub. Now the idea here is just to break this axle spline. Basically, you want to break the splines loose from the hub. It shouldn't really be seized, but they do kind of get stuck. So you see now how this is now free floating. So the axle is now released from that hub. Now we can go ahead and strike the ball joint up here. What the heck was that? Whatever. You guys are sort of in my way here. There we go. And you'll see the knuckle is going to break free. And what I think we're gonna have to do here is, let's see if this will give me enough play here. Yeah, what I think we're gonna have to do here is remove the tie rod end, hit that, and then that'll allow me to manipulate this knuckle here to get the axle free, and then we can worry about the strut. So the axle is out. You'll see it here, kind of just chilling. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna remove this shield here. It's 1, 2, 3, and 4 12 millimeters. We're gonna drop that. That's gonna give us access to the front differential and allow me to get in there with a pry bar to remove this axle. What I ended up doing here is just disconnecting the lower ball joint from the knuckle momentarily. That gave me enough slack to go ahead and manipulate the knuckle around the way I needed it to get the axle free. So let's go ahead, again, drop the shield, pop the axle out. Here's where we're at. Strut is out. You'll see it right here. It's out of the car. Went ahead, we also got the upper control arm out, which was kind of a pain in the neck. To change the upper, you do have to remove the battery on this side because this long ass bolt comes all the way out and hits the battery. So you are gonna have to pull the battery out, and then you're basically just walking the thing out. I ordered a new oil seal here for our differential because I know when you replace axles, a lot of older cars, you put the new axle in, it'll start leaking. I didn't want to have to deal with that. Now the problem is I used this exhaust pipe to try to drive the new one in, and where is it? I have it somewhere. It went in a little bit crooked and it kind of gouged up the edge here, so I got to run out tomorrow, grab a new one of them. So this side's not going back together tonight, unfortunately. And the way I like to do these, especially when I'm not too familiar with the platform, is I do one side at a time. That way when I'm putting this back together, I have another side here for reference. So I'm gonna get that upper control arm in. I'm not gonna tighten it. You don't wanna tighten these things until there's a load on the suspension, otherwise you're gonna preload the bushings. So I'm just gonna get the upper control arm in, and then we'll pick up again tomorrow. We'll drive that oil seal in, and then we can put the axle in, the strut, and really button this side up. And then we can go ahead and tackle the other side. All right, take two here on this seal. You'll see the new seal is now in, nice and flush. Everything there is good. We did go ahead and put in this upper control arm. Now, I set this ball joint to the way that they tell you to set it for a good starting point here in the directions with SPC. So let me just show you. So we set this to letter D, which basically you want it to look like that. So that's how I set that up. And then in the directions, they say you can put your final torque on this bolt without having any weight on the car because it's a free-floating bushing. So we did go ahead and torque that down. When you put this in, you're going to want to make sure that your bushing, whatever you want to call these washers, you want the concave facing out. So you want to see this gap here, basically in between the bushing and the O-ring or the washer. So that's good. Everything here is good. Now I'm going to go ahead and lube up my new axle. What we ended up going with here are some Cardone HDs. So they have the heavier duty boots, which is what I wanted. So we're just going to go ahead. I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the splines. We're going to go ahead and very gently slide that into the differential, and then we can go ahead and put our strut back in. So with a little bit of love and a little bit of finesse here, we got the axle in, it's torqued down, axle nut is in, everything's good, brakes are on, we rerouted our harness here for the ABS, everything's good, tightened everything up. So now we're gonna throw you on a time lapse. Let's come over to this side. The only thing I've done over here is I took the sway bar end link off. We had to get that off so that we can do some work over on the other side and get the sway bar out of the way. But let's go ahead and start tearing this side apart, and we'll be back with you. Okay guys, I had you on a time lapse there. I think the battery on the GoPro went dead, but this is the final result. I have rolled it back and forth a couple of times. Right now, because we went with the heavy duty springs, the front is sitting just a hair higher than the back. But once we weigh it down with an off-road bumper, I think it'll even out nicely. Now, we did come here under the hood and we removed this fuse box here, and there's two fuses that you need to pull under here. You have air sus right there, it's a 50 amp. And then over here you have air sus number 2, that is a 10 amp. We have gone ahead and removed them. And now there's one more fuse up under the dash that we have to check to see if we have. If it's there, remove it. If it's not, obviously you're not gonna have it, you're not gonna have to worry about it. So really all that's left for us to do here is throw our battery back in and the rest of our plastics, and we'll be good to go. So with that being said, please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. This isn't exactly what I would call an exact how-to video because we did jump around a little bit and skip a couple of different steps. This was more or less me just trying to show you guys what we've done to the truck and how we did it. So again, like, share, subscribe, stay tuned. We got plenty more coming with this thing. We've only just seen the tip of the iceberg here. We're gonna do a complete overland build on this and we're super excited to bring it to you.